Good morning, everybody.
Recording in progress.
It is now gone 9:30, so I declare this meeting of the Public Transport Committee open. Can I remind the committee members and staff that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available on the BOPRC Regional Council website following the meeting. I also remind all present that the local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, to council officers and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. Without further ado, we open the meeting, and just a bit of health and safety. Drop, cover, hold in the event of an earthquake. If there is a fire, the emergency exits are where, Amanda? Out that way only. We can't jump that way. So we go out and out the front, and we will meet across the road. Okay. The toilets are
Out the door and to your right.
out the door and to the right. Okay, so that's that done. We open the meeting looking for apologies, and the apologies I have are Jessica Andrews of Waihee, who has been who substituted with Michelle Farrow. Thank you. Commissioner Bill Wasley, Mayor Gary Webber, Deputy Mayor Andrew Isles, and Mayor Turner as is Mr. Thomas and Commissioner Selwood are on Zoom. Are there any further apologies?
So moved, Chairman.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Browning. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. We move to the public forum, and I invite Deb Turner to come forward, who's going to give us a minute presentation, plus questions of clarification only. Thank you.
Hello.
Morning, Deb. We're all familiar with you.
Yep. Haven't been here for a while though, but
No?
this one? Yep. Okay. My name is Debs. I'm here because I care about the people and care about our bus service and want Tauranga to have the best service they deserve. So it's more easier for people to catch a bus. I get some of my information from talking to people at the bus stop, and that's where I get a lot of my knowledge from, because I have a very caring person most of the time. The first thing I want to talk about is our bus trackers. Most of them are either broken or not working. Are you going to replace them or fix them at some time? Because the one down the mount has been gone since last year, and I've phoned up so many times. I've had enough. The trackers are really useful if you want to know when your bus is coming, or if the bus is not coming, or if it's late, or you can get another bus. I was just wanting to know, are you going to replace them or fix them?
I'll let you do your presentation,
Okay, yeah.
and then we'll continue.
And when the Gardner Street bus stop was closed, I made the most of it. It was so good because I could just walk up to Sandhurst and catch a bus, which gave me an hour extra in the morning at home. And in the winter time, it's cold. If you have to leave home at 20 to 8 in the morning, it's quite cold waiting for a bus. So there was other people that were happy about it too. Like I got home one night at 6, and there was 2 other girls on the bus, and they lived just down the road from me, and it's safer. You're not walking in the dark. It's a lot safer for people. Getting the 21 a lot. At least 10 people's been on that bus in the afternoon. I think people are learning that where it goes now, and they're catching it. And the 21 that leaves Bayfair there's a 2A and there's a 2B. I'm just wanting to know, why does the bus stop at the two different stops? If it says 2A, it should stop at 2A. I wait at 2A and it goes to 2-1. Now if I wait at 2-1, A1, it goes to A2. You can't win. It should, if this tells you Susan bus stop, it should stop there. It shouldn't go ahead and change it every time it goes. It's so frustrating and stressful catching that bus. If you ran the bus anti-clockwise to the Papamoa, it would save a lot of time for people down there. I've caught that bus a lot and it's just not very good, those twos. If you ran them anti-clockwise, which I'm going to cover a bit more, I talked to a lady in Christchurch and mostly their buses run every half hour. The Opita runs every 15 minutes and she said it works really good. And I thought, do we really have the people to run a bus every 15 minutes? Some of our bus runs just about empty. Most of the buses are empty all day, running around with empty buses. Do we have the people to run the bus? I believe by running the bus anti-clockwise you would cut out the buses running not in service. You wouldn't have so many buses running not in service. Buses will cover a bigger area. More people will be able to catch a bus. Same with having an Opita bus that ran from the city to Fraser Cove to Grayson to the lakes to Bethlehem City. Because I'm at the lakes at least once a week and I have to bus I have to get the early morning bus sometimes, and sometimes I go to Greece and I need to be there by 10. So the 22, the 21, I just want to know why you keep changing that time. That 5 minutes later, I miss every connecting bus from Bayfair. So I have to leave home at 20 to 8 to get to Grayson by 10, which is a waste of time, and it's in the winter time, it's cold. And before, when it was 9 o'clock, I could just jump on the 9 o'clock bus. So why do you keep changing the times? All you're doing is putting stress on people to get somewhere. It's annoying. So yeah, so if you ran the, if we had an Opita bus, it would save heaps of time for people. You say it's a lot further, but if you ran it anti-clockwise like they do in Christchurch, it works really good down there. And thank you for giving me the chance to improve the bus service.
Thank you, Deb.
Yeah.
Before we open for questions, can I just say that I will get staff, you've asked specific questions,
Yeah.
and I will get staff to actually respond to you directly and,
Yeah.
and copy me in to that, so that we follow that up.
It's a short, sweet talk this morning.
With regard to the bus trackers, that is currently operated as part of the infrastructure and done by Tauranga City, but we will follow that up.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Our staff will get.
And I've got one more question. I just want to know what you're doing about the number 5 that leaves early from Salisbury Wharf. 90% of the time it's leaving 8 to 10 minutes early from Salisbury Wharf. I just want to know what's been done about that. I have phoned up so many times, I've missed that bus so many times because it's leaving up to 10 minutes early.
And again, I'll get staff.
Yeah,
rather
thank you.
than trying to respond.
Yeah.
Off the cuff, we'll get staff to respond. Any other questions or clarification?
Should be a bus investor.
Yeah,
I just want to say thanks, Deb. I think
Yeah.
you should be a bus ambassador.
that's what someone else said. Someone said I would make a good ambassador for the bus.
Well, you already are.
Yeah, I am. I talk to a lot of people at the bus
Yeah.
stop.
Yep. No, we appreciate your feedback, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm just helping, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to help you out
No,
to improve our bus service.
absolutely, I really appreciate your
Yeah,
coming in, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll get back to you, thank you.
Yeah. thank you.
Our next presentation is from the Harry Perry and Down, Lucas Down from Tauranga Boys College. And so if you two would like to come forward for your presentation. Again, we've allocated 5 minutes plus time for questions afterwards. So, welcome and thank you for, this is your second appearance with us. And we really enjoyed your first presentation and look forward to this one. Thank you.
Over a year ago, on the 27th of May 2021, Harry and I presented to this House regarding our public transport situation in Tauranga. We pointed out quite a lot of shortfalls in the current system in place and proposed a significant change to the routing and scheduling systems of our urban network, covering all areas. This presentation was well accepted by the public, media and the Council. We were then invited to attend upcoming meetings in a panel group. Since then, many things have changed. Many things have happened and some things have changed, but not a lot has changed at all. In the meantime, we have both become year 10, turned 1 year older, grown taller, our voices have gotten a lot deeper, and we are still keen to use the buses as long as they are realistically usable. On the public transport side, our suggestions were positively accepted at our first presentation, but so far we hardly see any improvement except road improvements underway all across the city. Of course, some bus routes were amalgamated, which made them longer and so more affected by any incident, accidents, passenger misbehaviour, simple traffic congestion, which consumes time and results in delays the passenger is not happy with. One of our suggestions offered, for example, was to shorten the routes turned exactly the other way. Well, thankfully, after strong public opposition, this plan was scrapped because of the travel time from Ohauiti to the Mount being about 90 minutes, which is far beyond any acceptance to expect. Although the shortfalls were pointed out that you can read on your documents are still in place and unchanged. This results in preventing keen commuters from taking the bus, and so resulting in diminishing transportation numbers, and councils continue to miss out on millions of dollars in revenue. We originally suggested replacing all of the urban routes with multiple hub locations and orbiters. We suggested a large number of routes spanning all parts of Tauranga. As you can see, our original proposal was on large scale and reduces the chance of delay by making use of multiple hubs. These hubs involve both commercial, industrial and residential areas, providing connectivity between them through the use of multiple types of routes. But while it did focus on route changes, it also pointed out some key points with regards to the existing system.
Such as the fact that we currently transport less than 2,000 people per day, 65% of which are still school students, and only a very small proportion of the remaining 35% are in the workforce. As you might be aware, in places such as Europe, their transportation services operate in business mode and not sightseeing mode, and transport approximately 26.7% of the population on average. Considering that 220,000 people live in Tauranga and its outskirts, this means that to match that percentage we should be transporting 58,740 people per day. In reality, we are far away from such a number. Less than 2,000 people per day looks like a complete failure. So it's no wonder we're losing millions of dollars in revenue per year. Even drastic measures such as halving the price of fares didn't bring any more passengers onto the Tauranga buses, and this free ride policy for all students caused criminal activities being executed by minors. Although, to be fair, in recent weeks there has been an increase in passengers, but this is caused by skyrocketing fuel prices and not by a half-baked system. Our presentation a year ago suggested changing all of this on a large scale, taking people where they actually want to go, direct, fast and on time, which is quite different than the current system. offering more than a 50% reduction in travel time for most trips. So we appreciate your invitation to demonstrate on a far smaller scale how we could imagine a system change starting in Mātua and what it could look like. So let's have a quick look at the current situation there. For example, the timetables are rather optimistic than realistic. This leads to passengers waiting at the bus stops to start their journey and on the other end missing their transfers onto the rest of the network. In most cases at the CBD, the entire network is still centred around. This kind of timing also forces drivers rushing their runs to arrive on time and at the end of their runs to start the next one. This not surprisingly leads to a massive increased risk of injury, crash or even worse, casualty. Parts of Mātua are also not serviced despite that two routes, namely the 70 and 71, travel more like barrel, quite often bumper to bumper and empty, the entire Mātua loop around, day by day by day by day by day. There is also the issue of buses being too big for the narrow streets of Mātua, but most importantly being unable to be filled, and so wasting time, money and burning resources. Therefore, we could imagine that our proposal would solve these issues to benefit Mātua residents, for both the passengers and drivers. It would allow the buses more time and not to be rushed, leading to an increase in reliability and safety of the service, and much so less noise and rumble, and far less danger on the routes. And the routes for Mātua aren't affected by the bottlenecks that this toning of CBD creates, further reducing the impact of delays and increasing the reliability of services across not only Mātua, but across the entire network. But most importantly, it increases the likelihood of commuters using the system and further increasing speed and efficiency. So by now you're probably all wondering what this revolutionary concept that will bring change is. Lucas, would you care to explain?
Sure. We suggest a change in the routes in and out of Mātua with schedule changes to coincide with these new routes. If we look on a map, there are two routes travelling in and out of Mātua. The first of which is the 70, ferrying passengers from Mātua to the centre of town via Ngātai Road. And the 71, doing the same thing as the 70, ferrying passengers from Mātua to the centre of town, just in a different way, all day. Both of these routes waste massive amounts of money for just a few passengers. Instead of creating multiple hubs all at once, call Cherrywood a hub. This allows you to provide connectivity between this trial and the existing 60 and 72 A and B routes. From this hub at Cherrywood, we propose two different orbiter services taking passengers between Mātua and this hub. The considerable orbiter services are dubbed M1 and M2, Mātua 1 and 2, the first of which is the M1. As we can see on the screen, this route connects the roads that are currently served by the 70 and 71 throughout Mātua to the new hub at the Cherrywood shops, allowing passengers to easily hop onto the bus and change at Cherrywood to get there to their final destination. For this proposal to operate smoothly, it is required that the transfer times between routes at Cherrywood be 5 minutes, no more and no less. This allows people of all ages and abilities to transfer easily. The second orbiter is dubbed the M2, which serves areas of Mātua that haven't before seen buses, where there is a demand for them, such as the Woods Avenue and Eaton Crescent, providing much needed connectivity for residents to the new hub at Cherrywood shops and onto the rest of the network. The final route that we are proposing is dubbed the L1 or Link 1. This route provides vital connectivity for Mātua residents to Tauranga Crossing, Brookfield and Cambridge. A large proportion of potential customers travel to Tauranga Crossing and absolutely hate the time, unreliability and transfers needed to travel there. The L1 allows you to reduce this significantly. These suggested changes provide many opportunities to expand operations across the entire network by turning the existing bus stops into hubs, which is the first time-coordinated interchange in the entire history of our network. For example, an additional orbiter could be added to Mātua, or orbiters for Otamaitai and other places around the city, connecting to other hubs. Although we are only suggesting these Mātua routes at the current moment, this could save a massive cost for the council, as it scraps the 70 and 71 that are experiencing low passenger volumes to and from Mātua, while doubling up service and traffic on already covered routes for no reason.
To operate this trial proposal successfully, we suggest having dedicated buses to reduce the chance of delay for customers and leading to on-time performance of these routes being excellent. A trial of such proposal in a 3 to 4 month period would allow you to test, implement and gather data on our proposed system, which in future on a larger scale can be implemented to increase ridership across the entire network, with the end goal of providing an excellent public transportation system for the people of Tauranga that is actually used and profitable. To conclude, we have presented our suggestions that could change the routes and schedules for buses in and out of Mātua over a 3 to 4 month period. This would enable you to have a massive future growth of the entire network and make us, all residents and taxpayers who fund the system, one step closer to returning the bus system to profitability. I'd like to say a huge thank you to this committee for allowing us to return with another presentation, and for our supporters for taking time out of their days to come and listen to us. We look forward to consulting you and all of your further consideration, and would love to see such concepts coming to life in Tauranga for the benefit of everyone. And maybe we'll see you all again next year.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's always a pleasure to have you guys come and present this. You did a fantastic job at your first presentation last year, and it's a very well thought out presentation again this time. Just before I ask for questions of clarification, can I say that our staff are working on an overall route review. We did the Papama one earlier in the year, or was it end of last year, and that saved us a considerable amount of money. But what it did show us was that there was a reluctance of passengers to use the hub system, and so from an efficiency point of view, the hub system is certainly an attractive option from a planner's point of view, but our commuters sometimes have a different view on that. So we haven't gone away totally from a hub system, but we've struggled. I think there was always going to be a hub in Brookfield, wasn't there, Councillor Thompson? And but you have to find out where you can actually put it. So thank you for your presentation, and staff will take on board what you're saying. It hasn't fallen on deaf ears, and I ask for comments, questions of clarification from our committee. And we're starting with Councillor Thompson, Councillor Nees, Councillor Thurston at this stage.
Well, Harry and Lucas, fantastic, thank you. As a long-term resident of Brookfield, you've captured my real interest. Can I, just two things. We've got today at this committee, we're going to be approving our draft regional public transport plan. Could I urge you just to make a submission, maybe just put this presentation in as a submission to that plan, just so that we capture it, you know. But the other thing is that I really would like to ask our staff, Ollie and Lorraine, you've heard this superb presentation. As part of your refresh work, will you be engaging with these two fine young men? That's a yes. So that's a yes all round. So well done, Harry and Lucas. Thanks very much indeed.
Councillor Nees.
Thank you once again, a pleasure. I really enjoy your presentations. Could you tell me, have you any thoughts of the sort of bus that you would like to see running around suburbs?
Well, we plan to use the existing buses, although in future orbiters would be smaller buses, like in Eastern Bay at the moment.
That's what I hoped you'd say.
Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Chair. Well done, Harry and Lucas. It's great to have you with us again. Last time you were here, my colleagues unanimously agreed to ask that you be appointed to the Community Reference Group, Have you been attending those, and have you found them productive, and have you shared a lot of your thoughts with that entity?
Yeah, we attended, I think there was only one meeting because of postponement and COVID situation. Yeah, it was good. We, as you do, ideas, hope they took our ideas into consideration. I'm guessing they did. So yeah, those meetings were very appreciated. That we could attend them.
I think COVID intervened too, so well done. Keep up the good work.
Any further questions? Councillor Love is not a member of our committee, but I welcome you if you do have any questions or clarification that you are welcome to.
Thank you.
And,
No, thank you on this occasion.
and welcome to our regional chair, that leader. Thank you, came in late. Boys, fantastic. Love your work, and good critical thinking. It augurs well for the future of our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we move now to, there are no items that aren't on the agenda.
sorry.
Yep, we're going to come, you're Carly, I presume?
Yes.
Yes, we'll come to you. The order of business, there's no changes. Conflicts of interest, are there any conflicts of interest? There being none. The previous minutes is in page 8 of the agenda.
So moved, Chairman.
Moved by Councillor Thurston, seconded by Councillor Brunning. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Any matters arising out of those minutes? There being none, we move on to presentations, and we have a presentation from Carly Jones, accessibility using the bus system and B cards. Carly, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Chair, councillors. My name is Carly, and I'm passionate about two things, advocacy and bus using. People can sometimes say I'm a busaholic. I love using the buses, and there are some good things. For example, the Transit app, it allows me to look at the bus, find what route I want to take and how long it is to where I want the bus to catch the bus where I want to go. And another good thing is, not that I've had to use it a lot, but when I do have to use it, the Renewal buses are really, really helpful. And I also like the fact with the B cards, I don't have to carry a lot of change, and I don't have, the tap-on thingy isn't as, it's good and chunky, because with my shake sometimes I try and find for example, when using PayWave, and I sometimes can't find it. There are some issues with the buses, and that's just coming from my perspective. Sometimes the Transit app, it isn't running on real time, so I'm at the bus and I'm waiting, and when the bus doesn't come when I expect it, I'm like, well, let's just keep this out of the chambers. And another issue, sometimes the bus drivers, they don't pull in, and I like to use the back door to leave the front for the people that need it, or the people that are getting on.
but sometimes I get with the buses not being parked too close enough to the curb at the back, I go to get off the bus and I'm like, I hope I don't stuff up my ankle. And also the paper timetables, if you don't know how to read them, they can be really confusing. Yes, looking at physical accessibility is good and vital, but also we need the service to take into consideration other needs. For example, making sure that bus drivers are aware of hidden disabilities as well, because they may need a bit more support, but it isn't exactly obvious. And also some of the bus stops, I know this is a city council thing, but also some of the bus stops don't have chairs. So, for example, my nearest one in Chapel Street near the wastewater plant, it doesn't have a seat, so I'm sometimes sitting on the grass getting a wet backside. Yeah, it's just some of my experiences. Now, open it to the floor. Any questions?
Fantastic. Can I just say, Carly, thank you for coming in and sharing your specific needs with us, and they are something that we are very keen to improve the service of. We've upped our game in accessibility and disability services in the buses, and we're very keen to actually do more and improve that. We have a champion in Councillor Thurston for disabilities, and he has been a very strong advocate for the work that you're doing. But he's not alone. Our full committee is focused on that, and I've taken notes, and can I say that our staff will take on board your comments. We really do appreciate them. Takes a bit of bravery to stand up in public, and you've done a really good job.
Yeah.
So well done you.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. And I open it up for questions of clarification.
Superb.
Councillor Thurston.
Just in terms of disability, are you able to drive a car? Do you mind me asking? Are you allowed
No.
to drive it? Can you drive a car?
No, I tried, but being Tauranga, it's too much nerve-wracking for me.
Because my colleagues introduced a fare. Do you use that?
I do use the fare count, the free buses counsellor, and it was very useful, especially when I was working at the Crossing Vaccination Centre. Would have to get 2 buses to get there.
But you're using it most of the time?
Yeah.
Yeah. And can you speak to some of your friends and colleagues that also have disabilities? Are they finding it a huge advantage?
I haven't actually spoken to a lot of people, but one of my friends is from Taupo, and she and I think the free buses has helped her to complete her Polytech course here.
No? Well done. Keep up the good work.
Superb.
Yeah, well done you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input, and please don't be a stranger. Your view is most welcome, and the community engagement. Have you been involved in that as well for public transport?
No, I haven't, but I know from my previous work with the the City Council Disability Advisory Group, but there's links with that with like CCS and stuff.
Yeah. So we'll take on board and we'll see if we can get you invited to join it'll be the next training, I think, before we have another meeting of that, but, because we're coming to the end of our, we've got council elections in October, but after that, I'll see if staff can, put your name on the list and invite you to join us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We now move on. Yeah, we're still running ahead of time, so that's good. We've got a busy day, so we move on to the chairman's report. And can I open up by commending staff for the work that has gone on in PT. I know we get a lot of flack, with these empty buses running around town, but I have said it before and I'll say it again here, that I believe the actual bus service that we offer is fantastic. I know we have problems right now, and they will with the Tauranga Te Papa Peninsula upgrade, and especially Cameron Road, that is putting huge pressure on our services, and buses are struggling. But that said, we do have a good service, and I only hope that we can see it return to a full service rather than a weekend service as soon as possible. And I know there are constraints there with driver shortages, whatever, but these, in my view, have to be overcome, and that might need political will out of Wellington to help us do that. And Waka Kaikahi might be able to advocate on our behalf on that. But without that, we will struggle as a city. But staff have worked tirelessly through this, especially through the last 6 months, with all the changes that are going on in the city, and we take a lot of flack that I don't think is well directed, and so I commend staff for the work they are doing. Can I ask Namuka, are you presenting this?
Yes.
Okay, it's all yours.
Tēnā koutou to the chairs and the committee. I'm here today with Lorraine Sheen, who is our Acting Urban and Transport Planning Manager. And so we will take the report as read and are happy to answer any of your questions. We would just like to make a few highlights in terms of what's covered in this report. There are a number of topics covered in this report, as the chairman has mentioned. We have a half-price fare update in terms of the new initiative which was brought in from central government to have half-price fares. That's been extended through to the 31st of August, and the initial data we have on that has been that it's been quite successful in terms of increasing patronage by about 15%. We have an update on the emissions reduction plan, which has of course come in, just noting that there are a number of targets to 2035 which now need to be met. We've got an update on our public transport patronage, and again that's going to be covered in more detail in the Arotaki report. And as the chair has noted, there is an update relating to the driver shortage, which is now occurring not just within our region here in the Bay of Plenty, but all across New Zealand. And there is also a further update in terms of the change to the Cbd Interchange here in Tauranga, and also on the security services. As you'll recall, security has been a key concern, particularly in relation to the Willow Street, now Durham Street area, as well as in Bayfair. We have increased security in those locations, and the change of the interchange has had a great effect, and with that we're seeing a reduced number of incidents occurring. So that's probably the key highlights I'd like to pull out, but again, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I open it up for Councillor Thompson first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really just a comment. I'd just like to compliment the staff in the way in which they have worked, particularly with Tauranga City Council staff, to ensure that the new temporary interchange was up and running on time, despite 4 weeks of horrendous weather. I think it was a magnificent effort. I actually drive through the new Durham Street interchange every day, and I've noticed a real change in terms of the atmosphere, the security. The new security seems to be working extremely well. So really, Mr Chairman, I just really wanted to compliment staff on the effort and the work that went into what was really quite a logistical, I won't say nightmare, but it was a difficult job, so well done, thank you.
Absolutely reiterate what you're saying there. It was demanding, done at fairly short notice, in very uncomfortable weather conditions, and yet it went, seems to have transitioned very well. Councillor Rose.
Chairman, before Councillor Rose, on that last item, would you accept a resolution to that effect? Because I'm pretty sure your colleagues around the table would support you and Councillor Thompson.
Yes, I would.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like you to put it forward, you and Councillor Thompson. You represent our interests down there, so I'm happy to move, but I thought you'd better if it came from you and Councillor Thompson.
Councillor Thompson, you want to put some words around that?
Yes, my ageing brain will just take a wee while.
Yeah, that's okay, you've got time as we discuss this, so Councillor Rose in the meantime.
Tēnā koutou I te raka te rama ko tēnei o te matariki I nā tātou I a rātou o te toi moana toi o te Aotearoa. So kia ora Mr Chairman, first of all say happy Māori New Year, happy matariki. And just onto my part around just around the living wage. Ngā muta, would the change in the wage be from the 1st of September? So would that come into effect from then, or would it be later on in the financial year?
Through the chair, my understanding is that it's effective from the 1st of September.
Yep, good fine. Thank you.
Councillor Neves.
Thank you for a very informative report. I guess my concern is that our ratepayers and customers in Tauranga City are still having the weekend service timetable. So I'd like to ask, by what time do you think we will be back to our normal timetable? Because it is a level of service issue and it is a customer satisfaction issue. So I'll ask you that one first.
So through the chair, we are working on the situation. Obviously the bus driver shortage is having a big impact. We are reviewing the service in August, so the soonest we would be able to have something in place would be September, but we are monitoring that because of the shortage of drivers, not just in our region but across New Zealand.
Thank you. My other question is, we can contract with the bus company to provide a level of service, and obviously they're not able to provide it at the moment. So what is the financial implications of that to us? Are they paying us a penalty because they're not delivering the level of service that we contracted them to do?
Yes, so that's correct. We have negotiated with NZ Bus, and we have an agreed reduced price that we're working towards.
Right, thank you. And the other issue is around comparing apples with apples with our statistics. We look at trends and we look back at our previous years, and then we compare our patronage year on year. So obviously we've got a different level of service this year because of the weekend service. So are you able to, I'm not sure what you're actually reporting to us at the moment. Presumably you're reporting last year's full service and a combination of the portion of this year which had full service and then a portion of the year which has had a reduced service. So it's a bit hard to compare apples with apples. We know we're dropping patronage. It's a bit hard to understand what is truly because we're offering a lower level of service, what is COVID related, and what is the fact that the offering is not meeting people's needs. So are you able to provide us an apples with apples comparison for our patronage last year and this year? And I understand that's a bit of work, because we've got different routes running at different times. But how are we going to get a good picture if we aren't able to compare, excuse me, apples with apples?
So through the chair, as you have noted, it has been quite a challenging time over the last few years, and we've seen that impact across the whole country, not just here in Bay of Plenty, in terms of the differences in patronage and the falls that we've seen across the board. We will look into how to best provide that information. We're doing a lot of work on our data at the moment to see how we can provide that. So I'll take that offline and work that through with staff to see what's possible.
Excuse me, sorry about my voice. In the report on page 46, there's a fare box recovery of 7%. I knew that our free fares was going to have an impact. I didn't actually anticipate it was going to be that big an impact. And I guess once I got the data that you provided me, which gave me the breakdown of children's, seniors, tertiary accessibility and promotional fares, I can understand why our fare box recovery is so low. So I just think that this is a reason why we need to have that more broken down level of reporting when we're making policy. Because I know still, I think the government has a fare box recovery of 50%. 51. And while I'm not backing away from our decision to provide free fares for children and for, obviously we've got the Super Gold card and we've got extended for seniors, etc., we need to be able to understand the full impact of our decision. So that 7% fare box recovery actually did come as a bit of a surprise to me, and became obvious once I got this data you sent me out. So thank you, and I hope we continue to receive that sort of breakdown data. Thank you.
Can I just follow that up by commending staff on getting that data out? Because it's very enlightening, and we've been asking for that data for quite a while, and it's great to see it finally come in. And just so there's a clear understanding, approximately 70% of our bus services, our urban bus services, across the whole region is basically a zero fare recovery. 70% is free bus services, and that doesn't take into account the actual school bus services that are specific for that aren't part of the urban route. So it's even higher than that. So we have really pulled the lever hard to try to get that increase in patronage, and it is unfortunate that we've had COVID, so that, which hasn't helped. And then, as I say, within Tauranga doing the city redevelopment is not helping either. My question before we go to Mayor Turner is around the emissions reduction plan, and I want to urge staff to keep us abreast of how we're going on that, so that, you know, like every 6 months or something, so that we give us the baseline of where we are and let us know where we're tracking, because if we don't measure, we will never manage this, and it's going to be difficult. Because of our congestion, we have buses that aren't particularly full, and that makes it very hard. There's a real reluctance in Tauranga to get out of single-use cars, and the presentation yesterday by Mark Basong and Mr. Drummond on smaller electric buses is something that I've been advocating for a long time, and I think we have undertaken through that committee to get staff to have a good look at that, because I think that could be a game changer in perception more than anything, but it will show the public that we have a real determination to make a difference, and so that will be moved forward. I've been passionate about that for a long time, and rather than the big heavy Chinese-built diesel buses, electric buses that have diesel air conditioning. But if we can make sure we have good benchmarking to follow that one up, to see if we can. But with a growing population, it's going to be incredibly difficult on a raw data basis to achieve emission reduction when you've got such a fast growing city. And we recognise that, but somehow we need to build that into the scenarios so that we have a realistic target and we have targets that and make sure we meet them. Mayor Turner and then followed by Commissioner Selwyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and you've just highlighted exactly the point that I want to sort of refer to. I would congratulate staff. I think it's an excellent report, and I found that the detail that you've gone into. The emissions reduction plan, or the National Emissions Reduction Plan that was published recently, I find really interesting because it feels to me like central government is starting to step up a little bit in their thinking. I've done a little bit of reading around the fact that overseas, particularly down to large cities, your Hong Kongs, your Singapores and some of those places where actually public transport never pays its way. It actually is, its value is what it does in the area of emissions trade reduction, reducing traffic congestion and a whole lot of other things, and so there's some subsidy funding there because of the advantages we gain in other parts of the work program. And for me, it feels like central government needs to start to think a little bit more about how to support and I will say the word subsidise more on a more long-term basis public transport, because actually I think that all the work that we're doing here and that staff have been doing in Tauranga, I was there the other day, to me I feel like your congestion at 8 o'clock in the morning is worse than it's ever been, and I was going there regularly at that time, and I just thought, boy, there's some urgent need for investment here, and I don't see this is all about the regional council. Actually, I think that our national emissions reduction plan for a start off should be motivated. If we're serious about it, if that's exactly what the government wants, then actually they need to start to look seriously at how they're going to be contributing to getting the effect that they're after. I think that the targets are great and that have been listed there, but I'm just really interested in the fact that, as New Zealand need to catch up in their thinking a little bit, I guess is the question I'm asking us to consider, in that overseas, public transport is the solution needed for a whole lot of other problems that need solving, and particularly highly congested areas, and making a profit or even breaking even isn't even on the agenda. They obviously want people pay a little bit, they have cards and they dump some money on the card and pay for their trains or whatever they're catching. But actually the whole purpose of it, the main goal is to reduce traffic congestion, reduce emissions, and I just sort of wonder whether as our population grows as a country, we need to start thinking more realistically in our plan. This is not, I'm not saying this is a problem that I believe the regional council is the authors of. I think it's bigger than us all regionally, and I'm just really interested to know from staff if they've heard of or had any discussions with central government agencies around how serious they are about the targets that they've set, because I think that their support is going to be essential for us to realistically go ahead. If we're going to have to buy a different fleet, if we're going, all the things that we're looking at doing to improve patronage are great, and I'm again full credit to regional council transport people. You're doing a great job, but actually to think that we can then fund everything from the service itself, I think is unrealistic, and I think that some of the trials that have been run over COVID may be things that need to be looked at for the future. So great report, great work for regional council. I think central government needs to start to step up.
Thank you, Mayor Turner, and I totally concur with your comments. Before I ask staff to respond, or Party for that matter, can I say that it would be at least 25 years ago that I had a close look at the London public transport system, and I remember then we had the underground in London was at capacity, but it was still, so everybody was using it, fantastic service, and it was subsidised to the extent of about £4 billion 25 years ago. £4 billion 25 years ago. So It would be a lot more than that today. So you're dead right, it is a bigger issue than just us. And I don't have staff or Waihee would like to speak to this.
Ko Michelle Aho, through Mr Chair. I'm happy to come back and do a presentation with some facts and figures. I'm aware we've got our Precedent Transport Operating Model under review, and that needs to go to Cabinet, and also the SURF funding, which is the Climate Emission Response Fund, has quite a lot of money coming and will be allocated in certain ways. So I wonder if it's more beneficial if I come back with some facts and figures in a presentation that can be documented. Once things have gone to Cabinet, the messaging will be a lot clearer. But just be aware with the Ministry of Transport and partners, a lot of these things are currently being worked through, but there definitely is a commitment. I mean, I'm aware 2.9 billion initial total allocation from over 4 years, and 1.2 billion is allocated to the Transport Centre for sector for emissions and reduction initiatives, and they'll be broken down into programs, as we work through this. But if you like, I'm happy for it to be minuted that we come back with a presentation, because there's a lot of facts and figures with funding, how it might be broken down. I think it's probably better if I come back with something prepared. Is that all right? We
would certainly look forward to that. Thank you. Really appreciate that offer.
I think there's more information coming, so
Yeah,
I'd
sure.
like to do it in a coordinated way, if that's okay.
Any further comment from staff? We go to Commissioner Selwood.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I think on the emissions reduction challenge, and it is an enormous challenge, I was going to raise this under the public transport plan. What we now face is the need for a step change in both our thinking and action. The government is currently, its primary target is reduction in vehicle kilometres travelled. I have some difficulty with that target. My view is that the target should be emissions reduction. And in fact, conversion to alternative fuels will be one of the primary means by which we can achieve that, as will the role of public transport, walking and cycling, enabling mode shift. And I don't think that we have yet realised the significance of the gap that is required, particularly in that area. I think there's a piece of work that needs to be done which compares the government's aspirations, which are very strong on aspirations, but not actually all that strong on action and funding to deliver the aspirations. I think there's an important piece of work that we need to do as a region to identify the gap between our regional transport plan and our targets in that plan, which in the Tauranga situation seek to achieve a 5% mode share. Well, 5% mode share will be nowhere near what is needed to achieve the emissions reductions target that the government's got. So there's a significant gap between what we're planning to do and what the expectations of central government are. And I think it's important that we call that out. So I would ask the staff to consider undertaking a piece of work, effectively a gap analysis between what are we planning in our regional transport plan and how will that satisfy the requirements of government, and what would be needed to actually fill that gap. Because if we don't actually stand up to the challenge, we'll be here in another 6 months lamenting the fact that actually we're not making any progress, and we'll be another 6 months further down the track with nothing having been achieved.
Thank you, Commissioner Selwood. I totally agree with you. I remember, I chaired public transport back in the 2005 to 2010 period, and mode shift was all we talked about then, and 20 years later, 15 years later, we're not much further ahead. So if we keep doing the same thing, we'll get the same result, and somehow we have to have a circuit breaker, and it won't be a single solution. But that's where we need to have some critical thinking as governors as well as staff. And when I say as governors, we have to set the direction for staff to do that critical thinking. So I really always enjoy your comments, Commissioner, and I'm going to ask Namuta to respond.
Tēnā koutou. So just building on that, as part of this upcoming 2022-2023 Regional Council annual plan process, you have set aside some funding to specifically do a regional transport emissions reduction plan. So that will cover off the concerns that are being raised. And just on that, staff have already started work on this with partner agencies, including Tauranga City Council, and we know they're doing a lot of good work there on carbon reduction.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I'd just like to applaud Mayor Turner's speech, which basically set, I think, a fabulous vision, which is that public transport is the solution to a vast array of issues, social, economic. So thank you, Mayor Turner, for your visionary comments there. And I hope that this committee keeps those comments in mind when it gets bogged down into the issues around subsidisation, etc., of public transport. However, that's just a personal opinion. I would ask staff if they could help clarify, not necessarily today, the whole transport emissions framework. Because currently, as we know, we've got a national emissions reduction plan, we've got UFTI that sets transport emission targets, we've got the TSP, there are other sub-regional emissions plans underway, we've got the Bay of Plenty transport emissions plan, we've got our draft PT plan. Could someone please, on one page, just bring together what in fact we're trying to do across the region, broken down into sub-regions, around transport emissions reductions, because I am confused. Thank you.
So we won't ask staff to respond today to that, but that's they've taken it, I think they're not, it's been taken on board, and we will get that back to you. Are there further questions? Councillor Browning.
Yeah, just on the emissions, and I applaud what's being said, but I think Commissioner Chair Tolley raised it the other day on the total kilometres travelled to be reduced by 20% in a growing city, and the realism of that. So that just backs up what had previously been said. I also want to put a plug in. We're also, we keep talking and so we want more reports, and that more talking usually means more money. And we've got a $40 million beast here, 255 proposed dollars per ratepayer for Tauranga City, and there has to be some reckoning around all this somewhere.
Acknowledged. There been no further discussion. We go back to the recommendation. So the first recommendation is to receive the report, and the second one
Is to have coffee.
no, you're doing a resolution.
Your resolution.
Oh,
You were writing it.
I was. Somewhere. The committee complements
Turn your speaker on, please.
The committee complements regional and Tauranga City Council staff on the work that went into ensuring a temporary interchange in Durham Street was implemented on time.
Short and concise. We'll have a move. Are you moving the two?
So moved.
So moved. I'm happy to second that. Any discussion? There's been no discussion. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Carried. Okay, so we now on the agenda move to 4 minutes, we'll say 4 minutes of the agenda, we move to coffee. And we're going to break for 15 minutes, but if it turned out to be 18 minutes, that will be okay.
Recording in progress.
We move on to the draft regional transport plan consideration for public consultation. And that's Bron, you're leading this, Aidan.
I am, thank you Mr Chair, and morning to members of the committee. Also obviously got Lorraine, the interim Transport and Urban Planning Manager here, and Matthew Kilpatrick, who's a senior transport planner in our team, and he's doing a lot of work on the comms and engagement process for the draft plan. So I'll just prepare a brief presentation, so I'll introduce that and then happy to open the floor for questions and input from the committee. So obviously the purpose of this item is to seek the committee's approval to release the draft regional public transport plan for public consultation, and subject to that there's a secondary purpose to appoint a hearing subcommittee to hear and deliberate on submissions on the plan. Just running through some key background that I've probably run through with the committee before. The Regional Public Transport Plan is the key statutory document for public transport planning and investment in the region. It's a statutory requirement. The intent is that the plan takes a 10-year plus strategic view of public transport in the region, but with a focus on those first 3 years. Generally the review cycle is after 3 years you start looking at a review of the plan. So to meet these requirements, the Regional Public Transport Plan describes what we want our public transport system to achieve. So thinking about a long-term vision of and objectives for the system, how we propose to get there. So it proposes a set of policies, objectives and actions to implement the plan, and it also contains a quite a high level description of the public transport services we propose to provide in the region. As I've said, there are legislative requirements for the plan, and the framework is the Land Transport Management Act. Amongst the requirements in the Act, there's a set of guiding principles to take into account for those exercising powers and functions in relation to public transport. The Act outlines the statutory purpose of a regional public transport plan, has some quite detailed content requirements, notes the review timeframes, and as I've probably told you before, this is as soon as to have it reviewed as soon as practicable after the regional land transport plan is finalised, and we finalised that last year. A series of matters to be considered when adopting the final plan as it goes to regional council, and then also consultation requirements in the Act and the formal consultation process. To the review process itself, we've undertaken a fairly comprehensive review process over the last 12 to 18 months. That's involved some early engagement with the public, seeking their views on public transport and factoring that into our thinking. Some targeted engagement with key stakeholders, generally in the form during the COVID era, I guess, of online workshops and presentations to stakeholders. As the committee is probably aware, we've had a series of 4 Public Transport Committee workshops on various iterations of the draft plan as it's developed, and through the course of those workshops have taken on board a lot of feedback and input from committee members and attempted to incorporate that into the draft document. And we've also had regular project team meetings and workshops, and that's a multi-agency project team comprising members from the Regional Council, City and District Councils in the region, and Waka Kotahi representatives. Just looking at a high-level overview of the draft plan itself, it's been structured to achieve a logical strategic flow through the various requirements. It's designed to meet those Land Transport Management Act legislative requirements and taking into account Waka Kotahi guidelines. I won't go through that process all the detailed sections in the plan, but obviously at the end of the report, happy to take comments or questions on those. And just noting, I guess, in terms of our key objectives, policies and actions, we've got some key themes there that have that run throughout the plan. So these are key things like mode shift and carbon reduction, service planning and design, service and infrastructure delivery, public transport and land use integration. We've got partnerships, we've got fares and pricing, and we have, I probably can't actually read that last one. Oh, customer experience and information, the most important one, obviously. So moving on to the RPTP consultation and approval timeline for the plan. Some of the key dates that we're proposing is subject to getting a decision today. We'd release the plan for public consultation between the 4th and 29th of July. We have hearings currently scheduled in for the 17th, 19th and 22nd of August, with deliberations at the end of August, 31st of August, with a reserve day on the 1st of September. And this is all leading up to, all going well, a decision from this committee to recommend the final plan to the Regional Council at its meeting on the 23rd of September. And that would enable the Regional Council itself to make a decision around approval at its final meeting of the Triennium on the 29th of September. So as I've noted in the report, a comprehensive consultation and engagement plan has been developed if we go out for public consultation. We've got Matthew who's been leading that process and doing a lot of work in terms of identifying stakeholders that we need to get in touch with. And also the report recommends that the committee appoints a hearing subcommittee, and staff is seeking direction from the committee around membership of that committee for hearings and deliberations. So that's the, I guess, the plan and the process in a nutshell, or the proposed process. Happy to take any questions on the content.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for your work. Whoops. Thank you, Brian, and thank you for your work and staff. A huge amount of work to get this thing prepared, and we do appreciate it. We note that the timelines are very tight for this before the end of the triennium, and it's important that we do get this through, because if we had a huge change around at the elections and a different committee sitting on this, we don't want to have to start again effectively. So it is important that we actually get this completed if we can within this triennium. Do I have any questions? Councillor Nees?
Firstly, congratulations to staff. A huge amount of work, and I really appreciate our opportunity to input into the content. I've got a couple of questions. I'm not going to suggest, and suggestions, but I'm not going to suggest we make changes to the plan because it's going out for submission anyway, so there will be opportunity for adjustment. And I do hope that our members of the public actually do submit on the plan, particularly those people in the back who have been presenting to us today. We need as many fresh views and critical eyes on our strategy going forward as possible. A couple of the questions I've got is, firstly on page 42 of our agenda, we have a wiring diagram, policy context for the Bay of Plenty Regional Public Transport Committee. We have Bay of Connections and an organisation I don't recognise underneath it, Hei Maori Ahohau. Sorry, I've probably mangled that, but I'm not sure what organisation that is.
sorry, through the chair, yeah, my printed copy, I can't actually read the diagram.
I have that problem.
But certainly we can look into that. So this is essentially a diagram from the Regional Land Transport Plan.
I actually don't need to be told now, just that it does exist,
Yeah.
because I haven't heard of it before. Thank you.
Councillors, perhaps I can assist. It's Namuti here. He Māori o Haoho, or HMO, is an economic Māori development strategy that came out of Bay of Connections. Toi Kairawa have picked it up and are implementing it, so that's the linkage. So it's linked to Toi Kairawa and the work that they're doing.
I don't think it's going to mean much to anybody in there like that. So whether or not this can be changed following the submission process, just to make sure that people understand it as an economic development strategy. The other comment I've got is the challenges. One of the big challenges we're suffering right across the country is driver shortages. And I wondered whether that was should be considered as a real challenge for the future. If we don't have bus drivers, we don't have buses. And as a result of that, whether we need to have some sort of action in the final plan on working with bus service providers to ensure they've recruited sufficient drivers to deliver on the agreed service levels. Because it is, I know it's a national issue, but it hits us on the ground and affects our customers when we can't deliver our full service. The other suggestion which I would be making is on page 51 we identify the challenges of reducing emissions, and the pie graph underrepresents the challenge, I believe, because it's a Bay of Plenty wide picture. And it varies quite a bit across the region, and is a particular challenge in Tauranga, as I'm sure Commissioner Selwood will note. So I just wondered in the final version whether we shouldn't be putting in a pie graph for Tauranga as well, because Tauranga has a much higher level of emissions than proportional across the whole of the region. And I also had an issue about are our targets consistent across the Regional Land Transport Plan, across the Public Transport Plan, and what the gap is between our targets and where the national government is, or government is wanting us to go. Page 67 and figure 14, I was a little bit surprised there wasn't more intensification shown on the Te Papa Peninsula. So I just asked staff to check that. It seems to be very intensive right in the CBD, but it doesn't show intensification up the balance of the Te Papa Peninsula, and I'm not sure whether that's an old diagram. And that's it. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any response, Brian? Can do, will do.
And certainly note those and take them into account, perhaps in the final document as a consequence of the submission process might be the best way to address those.
I agree. I don't want to be asking you to be making changes now.
Thank you. Commissioner Selwood.
Thank you, and certainly endorse the comments of Councillor Nees, and in that vein, suggest another couple of, well, in fact, one's new, one's reinforcing the point, items that might be taken into consideration. One is the affordability challenge. There's no discussion really of our ability to fund the level of investment that will be required to meet the new targets, or indeed to achieve the load shift that we're seeking to achieve. So I think a paragraph in the final document on the affordability challenge would be useful to highlight, because I think we're going to have some clear advocacy roles for central government on the affordability issue. And the second issue is, and we've already discussed it today, is that it's not clear how our draft regional passenger transport targets support the ERP targets. and it might be worthwhile, even before in the consultation document, identifying that we're still working on understanding that gap and how it might be bridged, because otherwise we're going to get one heck of a lot of submissions that are going to highlight the gap. And you know, whilst that's helpful, I think it might be useful to kind of frame that we do intend to have a work stream that does bridge that gap. At least if nothing else, it will placate some of those who otherwise might be concerned. So that's a suggested amendment to the draft before it goes out. It probably only needs a sentence, Chair. I'll leave it in your hands as to whether or not you think that's worthwhile.
Staff response?
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, I'm certainly aware. So the draft document's been developed to be consistent with the Regional Land Transport Plan and the UFD and TSP targets, the existing ones. Obviously, very recently we've had the new government targets come through, and a slight complicating factor has obviously been raised previously is that the VKT reduction is a key driver. So we need to know what the implications of that is for mode shift and mode share of public transport. That's quite a detailed piece of work, and yeah, I'm more than happy to make clear in the document that that piece of work is in process, and we're very keen to understand what the implications are for public transport.
Thank you for that. That would be most appreciated. Any further comments? Everybody happy on the screen? Yep. Okay, then we move to the recommendations. Thank you for your presentation. Obviously, there's a high level of satisfaction there. We do have to remember that if we keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, we'll get the result we want or don't want. I'm happy to move 1 to 4. Before we do that, let's have a look at the appointment process for the subcommittee membership. You've got the names posed at this stage. I'll just bring it up. So the proposal is for myself as the chair of the subcommittee, with Mayor Turner representing the East, Councillor Nees representing the Western Bay, Councillor Thurston representing the Rotorua, and Commissioner Selwood representing TCC and the city, and Councillor Thompson representing the same as a Tauranga constituency. So I haven't put in alternates, which was one of the suggestions, because if you if you're trying to keep a regional distribution and you put a couple of specific alternates, it probably wouldn't work. So I think there's enough room for manoeuvre with that size committee. Is there any discussion on any 1 to 5 before we actually put the motions? Councillor Rose.
Sorry, that was pressing the button that I didn't need to push. Sorry.
That's okay, no problem. Would someone who's not included in number 5 like to move that as a motion? Councillor Brunning,
Mr. Chair.
Councillor Brunning will move it, and seconded by Councillor Rose. That's 1 to 5. Receives the report, approves the draft, authorises the in consultation with the chair for appropriate minor changes, appoints the subcommittee. All clear on that? Moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? It is carried unanimously. So that is done. We move then. Thank you, Brian, for that presentation. We move now to the Waihee Beach renewal of 85 connector bus service. page 122 in your doc.
Happy to move, Chairman.
So, been moved and seconded, but we'll just wait till staff. So did you get the move and the second? Okay, we'll take those as moved and seconded, but we'll have a staff report first. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou again to the committee. So we're on page 122 of your agendas. This is the contract renewal for 85 connector bus service through Waihee. We will take the report as read. Essentially, we are seeking your approval to renew the contract with a 2-day-a-week service, and we just note that the funding is accommodated within the annual plan. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, are there any questions of staff? There being none, we go to the recommendations. Receive the report, recommends that we endorse the continuation of the service for as a permanent 2-day-a-week service for a further 12 months, and note the associated funding. Sorry, so we're receiving the report ourselves, and then the two recommendations are to our regional council. So it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carry. Thank you. That was quick. We move on to the Western Bay Ferries feasibility study, and that is on page 128. And staff will give a presentation. Can I just say that I was a bit disappointed that one of our agencies brought this to the media before it even got to, that they read the agenda, and we try to put our agendas out early, but we don't actually expect our agencies to comment on them before they've gone to the committee. I thought it was a bit disrespectful, actually, and trying to leave the committee, so please take that in mind. That's my slap in the hand for priority one. Having read that this morning, but anyway, we move on. It is what it is. Namuta, or is it Ollie? Ollie, have you met this committee in full before?
Tēnā koutou to the committee. This is my first time presenting in person to this committee, so I'll just briefly introduce myself. I'm Oliver Haycock. I'm the Service Planning and Project Delivery Team Leader. So I will take the report as read and just highlight a couple of things. So firstly, just to mention that the feasibility study is currently in draft. We're continuing to work with partners, and we will look to bring this report back to the committee once the study is finalised. But our draft findings are that there is no short-term, low-risk, low-cost option that could be delivered that would likely be attractive to customers, as the success of the ferry service is dependent on a number of moving parts, mainly infrastructure requirements to support the provision of services both at Omokoroa and Mount Maunganui and Tauranga Cbd. So I'm more than happy to take questions.
Okay, it is open for questions. Councillor Thompson, was that Councillor Nees?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ollie, did I hear you say that staff are going to continue discussions with partners?
Through the chair, that's correct.
So irrespective of what gets discussed here today, there will be ongoing discussions. Is that the situation?
Yes, so this is an update at this stage.
Thank you.
Councillor Nees, followed by Commissioner Selwood.
Thank you. I'm aware that there has been commercial ferry services running previously, particularly between Mount Maunganui and Tauranga City. Are you able to tell us why they actually stopped? My memory is a little bit hazy around that.
I can't give you a direct answer today. on why those services stopped, but through the draft work that we've done, we've identified a number of challenges. So it would, from our draft work, need to be a two-boat operation to deliver a level of service that we feel would be attractive to customers. That would clearly come at quite a high cost. So we would need to consider how viable that would be, given the benefits it would bring.
Just my comments are, I accept that short term there are barriers that would possibly stop us from progressing this, but I would like to think that we continue working, and I'm pleased to hear that you say that we're going to continue that, so that we're in a position to develop a business case which potentially may allow service delivery once the required infrastructure is in place. I think we need to be certain that there is good walking and cycling infrastructure as well as parking infrastructure. But I guess my question is also, if a commercial operator came to us with a proposal for a trial in the interim, could we consider providing some subsidy to test the market? If somebody did do this, because we have had a commercial operator previously, how many hurdles would we have to jump through to progress that?
Tēnā koutou again to the committee. So in terms of commercial operator could come in, and then there's a process that they would need to go through to get approval to be able to operate. However, if the intention was to subsidise that, then it would need to go through a funding process in order to be able to gain those subsidies. And of course, that is would be a joint funding process, because it does relate to providing public transport services. So it would then need to go through the steps.
So there would still be quite significant hurdles to providing funding for that. Notwithstanding that, I very much support your approach, a partnership approach between Tauranga City, Western Bay, Whakakotahi and us, and hope that we will deliver some sort of, and to report back to us in our next meeting when you're bringing the full report, with some sort of timeline and project plan for action, with the aim of running a pilot or initial service by X, whatever it is, whether it's 5 years or whatever, in line with the infrastructure needs. So thank you.
Commissioner Selwyn.
Thank you, Chair. The commissioners in Tauranga City are actually very supportive of encouraging alternative modes of transport, including ferry services. And I guess the man in the street always asks the question that we've got this water, why aren't we using it? And I think that underpins the sentiment that comes through in the Priority 1 research. But notwithstanding that, we all know that there are enormous barriers to enabling this, notwithstanding the need for car parking, probably the most significant from a commuter point of view, and that is a really challenging issue for us. I do wonder, though, whether or not there may be an opportunity to keep a weather eye open to low-cost, low-risk kind of opportunities, just to test the market a little bit. I had a conversation, in fact, all 4 commissioners had a conversation recently with Main Street Tauranga, who were highlighting the issue of bringing cruise ship passengers across from the Mount to the CBD, and the issues now associated with getting buses to do that and access to the port, etc. And they mentioned, and I don't know the details of this, but they mentioned there is a vessel based out of Mokoroa, as I understand, that can carry up to 40 passengers. And I suspect doesn't require the same upgrades of the wharves that are included in the report. Cruise ships are coming back in September, and I'm just wondering whether or not there might be a low-cost, low-risk kind of initiative to trial that, bringing cruise ship passengers across and potentially other passengers that might have an interest to come across, just to test the viability of that as an alternative means. I thought in a suggestion. The other point, in terms of the infrastructure for the wharves for a more substantive service, We of course struck our long-term plan and our annual plan, and the current provision for infrastructure investment is not until later in the 10-year cycle, as the report highlights. However, were there to be interest by the Regional Council in providing ferry services, I would think there would be support from the Commission for bringing forward that investment in our next LTP process, which of course is 2024. It would probably take us all 2 years to get, or the time between now and then, to get a plan underway. So I think actually the opportunity to bring forward that infrastructure investment would be there in that next round, and I just highlight that as a possibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you want to respond to that, staff, or?
Through the chair, just to acknowledge the Commissioner's comments, we will be engaging with TCC staff as we move forwards to prepare our final feasibility study. So look forward to connecting with staff at Taronga City Council.
The exciting thing about the resumption of cruise ships is that we won't have the constraints of car parking, and that car parking constraint is very much a case for Omakara as well as Taronga City, so Western Bay. So I welcome all the comments, and I concur with Commissioner Selwood and myself that this is a draft report. It's not, the time is probably not here, but we still should keep an open mind for a low cost, low risk model if one should eventuate. So at the moment, it receives the report, notes draft findings for the feasibility study. Any further comment before we move that? Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Lees. Any discussion? All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? You are against, Commissioner?
Sorry, no, just lag in response time, so it was a vote for.
Okay, thank you. All in favour, please say aye. No, you've done that. Carried. Thank you. We now move to the Rotorua Network refresh, page 178. And that is going to be Ollie again, isn't it?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, I will take this report as read, but just key things to highlight. We ran a public consultation in Rotorua around our proposed refresh of the network. The response numbers that we received were very encouraging. We had a really, really healthy response there. We have not yet analysed the feedback in detail, but I have written a report that highlights some of the initial findings, so staff will now be working to reflect on the feedback received and bring a deliverable refresh proposal back to this committee following that review and work with Rotorua Lakes and Waihee.
Do we have an indication of timing for that?
Hopefully later this year.
Thank you.
September, ideally.
Any open for discussion? Can I have Mr. Thomas first and then Councillor Thurston?
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Thanks for this report. I'm pleased to see the number of responses you got. I was a little disappointed. The consultation didn't seem all that visible in Rotorua to me, and certainly all the people I talked to about it, telling them about it, didn't know it was going on. So I'm glad to see that we did get some results. A little concerned to see a very low turnout of results from people who don't currently use the buses. You know, it's vital for us to get more people on the buses, so we need to be reaching out to those people who aren't currently using them. I just have a question around, you did mention working with some of the businesses that had the proposed new bus stops outside them, but you didn't actually say how that consultation went. Did you get favourable responses from them or concerns? Just interested what sort of feedback you got there.
So through the chair, the next steps will be to fold the response to the public consultation back in to finalise routes. Separately, we will be reflecting with Rotorua Lakes Council on the need for bus stop relocations and new bus stops in Rotorua CBD. As part of that work, there will be a separate engagement with local businesses around the placement of those stops. So we have written to local businesses and given high-level indicative locations of potential new infrastructure, but we are yet to have that formal consultation with them, which is needed.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, just following on from that, it is really important to have face-to-face contact with those businesses later on. I think they are very touchy around movements and of the public transport system. We discovered that last time we moved bus stops around. There can be a lot of angst from businesses if they think they're losing access to customers by a bus stop turning up in front of them, or conversely by moving away from them as well. So important to have that face-to-face contact.
Thank you. Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of responses, picking up on Phil Thomas's comments, the target was 80. Can you just flush that out again for me? Because I think I share the view held by others that it's a pretty low number to aspire to. I know we received 196, and you said that was described as a healthy list of responses, but in terms of the information that we're sourcing from the public, I'd just be interested for you to flush that out a little bit more. I also have a subsequent question.
Through the chair, so that target was based on response rates that we'd previously had on Rotorua public transport consultations, which from memory was in the region of about 40. So we were looking to at the very least double that target. As you say, at the time of writing this report, we'd received I think 194 responses. We did spend a lot of time on the ground in Rotorua, and we actually had support from Rotorua Central Mall. And on 2 occasions we had a stall in the centre of the mall to try and talk to those non-users. So yes, we as staff were encouraged by the high response that we received here compared to previous consultations in Rotorua.
I stooped to watch or look at social media yesterday, and a large number of responses were from people who were pretty irate about what we were proposing, and also saying that they would have no intention whatsoever of using public transport, which I found a bit of a oxymoron. But in any case, having said that, as I mentioned in our pre-briefing, the Mayor of Rotorua in particular and the councillors have always been keen to have an orbiter to connect what we loosely describe as the 2 CBDs in Rotorua. And I know you gave a response which I'd like you to share with the colleagues here today, because we're now going to move away from an orbiter, and you say the same issues that the orbiter was going to address can now be addressed with this reconfiguration of routes. So I think we need to convey that to the Rotorua public.
Yes, and through the chair, that is the intention. So the refresh network, as proposed, would have cross-town routes that would loop around the CBD and hopefully provide very similar benefits that would be given by an orbiter service, but in a more efficient way. The other thing is, whilst at face value it does sound like we are taking the 11 current routes and cutting those down to 5, in actual fact, with those cross-town routes, the majority of the coverage that's offered by the existing network would remain, and we hope that it would actually provide more connectivity to many residents in Rotorua.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, did you consider using focus groups as well as just going out for submission? And I'm being a strong advocate for focus groups if they're selected unbiasedly, so that you get a broad section and people can put real input in. Did you use them at all?
So through the chair, we didn't use focus groups for this consultation, but we did write to a number of community groups, some of which provided fairly extensive and very helpful responses to the consultation.
Thank you.
Happy to move the recommendation, Chair.
I was just going to ask if you'd like to do that. Well done.
Sure.
Moved
Thomas
by-
would like to second it.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Thomas. So moved by Councillor Thurston, seconded by Mr. Thomas. The motion is that we receive the report with the initial findings. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carry. Well done. We move on. We move to the Arataki report, page 187. And we're going to have Simon Bell is on Zoom. I think he's presenting with them again. Welcome, Simon. Do people know you, Simon?
I've presented to this committee a few times, but so I'm Simon Bell and I'm the team lead for the Transport Systems team.
Thank you.
So I'll just share my screen. Apologies for not being able to make it into the office today. Had a few difficulties getting in there, so okay. So hopefully you can see the title screen there. And basically I'm speaking to the Public Transport Arataki Tuatoru Patronage Insights. Basically this is a quarterly report to the council and to the general public on trends and insights. Yes.
Can you try to make it full screen?
Apologies for that.
No, that's all right.
Might have to swap.
That's it. Thank you.
That's the one. Okay. That worked perfectly last time, so apologies. Okay, so I refer you to the covering report on 187 to 191. I might have a little bit of disjoint with my page numbering here. It's out by one page. But basically, that's the covering report for the PT Arataki Tuatoru report, which itself begins on page 192. And this report covers performance monitoring for the period of 1 July 2021 to 31 March 2022. So referring to the financial summary on page 194, I'll just step through an order of how this report's presented. Basically the key highlights are the operating revenue at the end of Q3, so that's the quarter ending 31 March 2022. We have 1.9 million lower than budget, and the full year forecast is now 2.96 million lower than budget, largely due to reduced fare revenue in Tauranga due to COVID and the reduced timetable, as well as some other impacts you've already discussed this morning, the dilution of fares through free fares for schools and the 50% fare initiative from central government. That won't have been seen, that last one won't have been seen in this quarter, but it will impact future quarters. Rotorua fare revenue was reduced by 0.6 million due to the optimisation of balanced network not going ahead this year. And finally, the decrease in fare revenue resulting from central government's half-price fare initiative, which is offset by an increase in Waka Kotahi subsidy. Operating expenditure at the end of Q3 is 3.1 million lower than budget. Full year forecast is 4.2 million lower than budget, and that's primarily due to UFTI, or the Urban Form and Transport Initiative, and Western Bay of Plenty Transport Plan of $2 million, and Rotorua Optimisation, a balanced network of 1.16, not proceeding this financial year. Bus decarbonisation feasibility study of 0.3 million is forecast to commence in 2022 but complete in 2023. So that results in a reduced consultancy expense this financial year. So moving on to patronage, Basically, the next couple of slides cover pages 195 to 202 of the agenda and drill down to some regional views as well as some other insights. So quarter three, 1 January through 31 March, we had 513 boardings or trips across the region, which is down 16.5% on prior year. There's already been some robust discussion around sort of teasing out the various impacts of COVID and sort of fare dilution, reduced timetable and so on, and how that impacts on these figures. I've got another slide after this one which isn't in the agenda but is quite telling. So just behind this number we've also got a year-to-date figure of 1.63 million trips taken, which is down 17% on prior year, same period. And that means we're behind on our KPI of a number of passenger transport trips taken in the region. I think we all know, by and large, the drivers behind that. What I usually show at this point is also the a chart which compares us to other similar regions, so Otago Regional Council and Waikato Regional Council. And you can see there, apart from the dip in the sort of orangey gold line for Waikato in late 2021, where they had a lockdown, we track very, very closely in terms of the broader trends. So it's almost no surprises. We're all dealing with the same issues, and the micro trends of our region sort of go across all regions. And that's why I've added this particular slide, which, as I said, isn't in the agenda, but does speak to some of the points that have been teased out around the impacts of factors influencing patronage. So it makes comparing year-on-year trends very, very difficult and challenging, and that includes unwinding things like COVID lockdowns, which have come in and out at various points in time, free fares on school buses, the government initiative for 50% free fares, and of course that's moving to the Community Connect 50% free fare on 1 September. So the reason I've showed this in particular is that it just shows a very granular view of patronage by day, by week, across all of the similar regions, and includes Horizons and Queenstown. And it's quite telling for the three big lines, which is, again, this is just a drill down of the last slide. Those trends are incredibly correlated, considering how different our regions are in terms of the makeup of people and geographically. So if you look at this, we can tease out the impact of Christmas holidays, the move to Omicron Red in late January, which is the first dotted line on the left. And then we had 4 weeks of low COVID cases under the COVID traffic light system. And then the large dotted line in the middle is actually, I've tried to drop in there while you were speaking earlier, the Tauranga move to reduced timetable, just to show that, yes, there is an impact. We seem to have had a slightly steeper slope downwards, very, very slightly in Tauranga, which is the blue line, Bay of Plenty. Tauranga represents about 70% of the Bay of Plenty, so you would expect that to come across in this chart. But we've also tracked in line almost perfectly with the broader trends in Waikato and Otago. So yeah, you can draw what you like from that, but to me it speaks to that the impact of the reduced timetable hasn't been as dramatic as we might have thought. Of course, that's been offset by the introduction of the 50% free fares, which has sort of encouraged patronage back onto the buses, and of course the increase in petrol prices, which one would hope are either driving people to work from home or get back into the buses. So that came in that green line on 1 April, I believe it was, and then of course we moved to orange COVID alert on 14th of April. The very steep and obvious dip there is when we moved to Easter holidays and then the school holidays straight afterwards. And then straight after those ended, we saw a spike back up to above, very nearly, the highest patronage of the year. And to my mind, that was largely due to the 50% free fare, encouraging people, and so on. So quite telling. Encouraging to know that all these impacts are nationwide, they're not just us. But across our region, basically Tauranga, which again represents a big chunk of the network, is down 17.1% on last year, which we had 430,000 trips this quarter. We had urban trips at 285,000 trips, which was down 20.9% on last year. Schools up 145,000, down 8.8% on last year. But February was the highest month of February since the inception of the school peak fare free, which is really encouraging. At the same time, we've had increased security coverage at Willow and Farm Street with extended hours at key times of the day. And then Tauranga moved, as noted earlier, to a reduced timetable on 21st of February. So with our charts in Arataki, we're trying to tease those things out with these various lines and call-outs on the chart. So I've just included one there on the left to show that we have pointed out the reduced timetable impact. Between February and March, it does seem to have gone down a little bit. I think this is Tauranga urban, so it discounts the impact of schools. So there was a small impact, but that has been sort of offset by and large in April by the move to the cheaper fares. Finally, for missed trips for Tauranga, which is a measure we pay quite close attention to, we saw missed trips of 0.83% of planned trips. So on any given day, there's quite a lot of noise around missed trips, but when we look at it as a sort of macro figure, we're tracking along sort of above expectations, if you will. We're delivering quite well on that. And then also while we're talking, I added this other chart on the right in because that shows Tauranga urban a bit more obviously just for the months of this calendar year. And you can see quite clearly a dip in April, again, school holidays and Easter. But then in May, largely due to the cheaper fares, quite clearly there's been an increase in patronage. And that May is by no means seasonal. The only seasonality we really see is around school holidays and Christmas break. So that's quite telling to me. Across the region further, we've got Rotorua had 65,000 trips, down 17.6% on last year. The reason I've shown this chart with the highlighted section is because it sort of teases out there's been a really good uptake of the 50% fares in Rotorua in particular. To me, that shows, apart from school holidays again, quite a sustained lift across May. It's quite hard to read the dates along the bottom, but the broad trend is quite obvious there. And then finally, Eastern Bay of Plenty, we had 6,000 trips, down 5.5% on prior year. So arguably, this current year, the smallest impact of Omicron was in Eastern Bay of Plenty, which is a bit counterintuitive because there are the few vulnerable populations down there with very little bus service. So the corollary to that is though that quite often bus is the only way they can travel. So there are a couple of things offsetting each other in there. Some other highlights, we've got the half price fare we've called out in the Arataki report, page 203 I think it is, and that was implemented on 1 April for an initial period of 3 months, which has now been extended in budget to 30 August and then superseded by all fares apart from for Community Connect people reverting back to 100% of full fare. So you can see the chart was tipped on its side a bit there, but you can see quite clearly from the shaded area that, again, for the total region, to me, there's been quite a clear increase, and it's still growing. So I don't have any trends beyond May at this stage. They will be shown in the next Arataki, but to my mind, that's quite a clear increase in patronage, and that's encouraging. And I believe that similar trend has been experienced across the nation. School fare free in Rotorua, we had, and Eastern Bay, of course, We are showing comparative growth in Rotorua for the first 2 months of the year compared to 2021. So we're up 8.8%. Just to be clear, that's child boardings at peak travel times. Sorry, I said 2 months there, it's actually January to March. Whakatane to BOPRC is down 14.2% on January to March 2021. We have a suspicion, though, that this could be due to changed study habits as a result of Omicron. We will have to keep an eye on that and just tease out whether that continues to be the case. Customer experience, which we report on page 206 of your agenda, and the Arataki report. We had 5,400 transport-related calls received by council this quarter, which is 45% of all calls received, and 1,600 after-hours calls received into the Tauranga City Council after-hours call centre, which is 65% of their calls. And then we tease out the complaints per 10,000 boardings trend. It's something we keep an eye on quite closely. And generally it correlates to either missed trips or to changes in the network. So you can see there, and there was a bit of a blip in February, and that's probably when we, for Tauranga on the left-hand chart, that probably correlated with the change to the reduced timetable. So the call centre was working really hard to sort of be the first point of contact on those and resolve those complaints on the call. And it looks like they were quite successful because through March that dropped away quite significantly. For the average in the quarter per month, we had 7.3 complaints per 10,000 boardings. So Rotorua, that's 7.4% complaints per 10,000 boardings. And that trend fluctuates quite a lot. I think it's probably going to stabilise a bit now, although we're going to get the questions following the refresh consultations. So that's that slide. Moving on to total mobility and accessibility. Total mobility trips of 15,660 during the quarter, which is an encouraging 2.9% up on quarter two last year. Quarter two 2021-22. We had 3,520 registered total mobility scheme members as at the end of March, and we had 156 new applicants received in January to March this year. Accessibility concession, again, an astonishing amount of trips taken under that concession. We've had 19,233 concessions trips taken during the quarter. We've had 110 applications processed and accepted during the quarter. And finally, we had 1,328 applications processed since go live on 1 July 2021. And then we just have a bit of a breakdown by area. Of course, that's commensurate with population by and large. So that's the end of the slideshow there. If you have any questions, please.
Thank you very much for that detailed work, Simon. Open it up for discussion. We have Mr. Thomas and Councillor Lees, Councillor Thompson in that order at this stage. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Thanks for the report. Just as always, I'm interested in the Rotorua figures and around that reliability and punctuality of trips. And it's more a comment than a question, I guess. We're just about to have yet another series of roadworks going on Tinai Road. So I think just as when the Tarawera roundabout was being rebuilt, we will see issues around punctuality for the eastern corridor, and Whakatane is widening the next section of Tinai Road, State Highway 30, and I think that's going to take most of the year to happen. So I think we can expect punctuality issues there again, unfortunately. Thank you.
Councillor Lees.
Thank you. Just two questions about the financials. Firstly, and this is, I'm really talking on behalf of the Regional Land Transport Committee, around the stock truck item in the budget, which there has been very little progress. Could you tell me why is that and what is planned, please?
Through the chair, I'll need to come back to you on that and provide an update, and I can do that via email.
Thank you. And secondly, the overspend in Careless Wednesday. I noticed that the app has gone live now, which is great. But if you could give us some commentary on that overspend, please.
No, I'll have to defer to our finance colleagues if anyone's there. Otherwise, we'll have to bring that back to the committee.
Through the chair, we'll need to bring that back to you as well.
Thank you. Can you bring that back to the whole committee?
Will do.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Simon. Really, really good reporting. Just going to the complaints. Your slide on the complaints that I think it was nearly 5,400 transport-related calls, 45% of all complaint calls to BOPRC Regional Council TCC after hours. It seems extraordinary to me. I mean, if we were running we are running a business, aren't we? Or are we? But I think that number of complaints is staggering. Is anyone else?
Through the chair, sorry, just to clarify that point, those are customer contact calls. So by and large, those are around timetable questions and where's my bus questions.
Right. So they're not necessarily complaints, they're seeking information. Look, I would really appreciate in the next quarterly report if that could be broken down so we can really understand exactly, what's happening for our customers, what they're not happy with, what information they're seeking, etc. So if you'd be good enough, Simon, would that be possible to break that down a bit further? Otherwise you'll have my blood pressure rising, and a little old lady like me doesn't need that. Thank you.
Through the chair, of course, yes, I know we can do that, so I'll make a note to add that in.
I think it highlights the fact that one of our key KPIs is to be customer centric, and we really do have to work hard on that. I know that there's a lot of constraints with the infrastructure at the moment that will raise the blood pressure, but customer centric focus is the only true test of how we're going. Any further questions? It's to me, Simon, to thank you for your work on this. Getting good data is how we make good decisions, and your area has certainly stepped up in the data in recent times, and I certainly appreciate it, and I'm sure Commissioner Selwood, who's a bit of a stickler for data as well, appreciates it as well. So keep up the good work. We really do need a step change in data, and you're starting to show that we can get it. And as a result, we will make better decisions as we review both our fares and our routes in our bus services. So thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move that report as I can get what page are we? Right, just to receive the report, I think it was.
Page 188.
188. Receives the report. I'll move. Seconded by Councillor Thompson. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. That, I think, brings us to the conclusion of our meeting, and thank you for keeping us to time. Staff, fantastic timetabling, because we were due to finish at 12:10, we're finishing at 12:03, so we're ahead of time, but been very accurate right the way through in timekeeping, so appreciation to you, Madam Timekeeper. And thank you everybody for your goodwill in this committee. I think we're making progress. It's public transport is a frustrating business. We're spending a huge amount of money on it, and we do need a big step change in customer service. Can I say lunch will be in the councillors' lounge,